Your live, your live.
Actually, this back half of Glendy looks like it's already been
Oh,
repaved.
yes, ma'am. No,
It's not that bad, but going through those curves.
He knows his stuff, but he's also playing. He's a giant. I mean, you know, you put him on those cases where you need a little more muscle. He's the guy.
In our pickup trucks.
Thank you very much.
Well, it's just. My wife, she drives over.
It's 7.
Do I have to wait? Just kidding. And we'll just reconvene. I'm being 7 o'clock. We're reconvening into open meeting. Do I have a motion?
Yeah, I've got a motion. I make a motion that to move Rick Lawrence to the unexpired regular term ending September 2023, and Siobhan O'Brien to alternate 1 position expiring on September 2022, and then Rebecca Jenkins to alternate 2 position ending September 2023.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Second. All those in favor? I don't vote. Motion carries. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This time, I would like to introduce Thad Chambers, our new town administrator. He comes from Haslett with over 15 years of municipal government experience. Thad, I'll let you talk a minute.
Just excited to be here. This has been something I've been working towards for some time. A lot of my experience has been project management for cities, economic development. But after, talking with Corey and meeting with the town council, I knew this is where I wanted to be. So I saw the clear vision the town has going forward, and I hope to just serve and do the best job I can to help y'all get there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're looking forward to working with you.
Welcome aboard, Ted.
Thank you.
On behalf of the town council and the staff, I'd like to offer special thanks to Corey Reum. I hope that's right. Who stepped in and served as interim town administrator for 8 months. We appreciate your time and efforts in keeping the operations running and your assistance with town administration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Corey. We appreciate it.
So is it strange?
All right.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Corey.
Well, you would have laughed if they would have let me put what I really wanted. I was gonna put Savior on there, but you saved me.
Thank you, Corey. Appreciate
Yeah,
all
thank you.
your months of experience, years of experience. You've helped us a great deal.
It's like really nice to view from the audience to watch a meeting here.
Public
Do what?
participation.
Oh, yeah.
If you haven't already done so, please fill out a card if you'd like to speak during public participation. If you wish to speak on an agenda item, please fill out a card and then we'll call on you during that item. Tim House? Yes. Please state your name and address, please.
Tim House, the address I gave is 96 McMakin, which is right next door here at the store. I actually live in Double Oak at 240 McMakin, just up the road. I have an agenda item later, but I know you have a busy agenda tonight, and it was suggested maybe I just speak in public participation. So that's what I'm doing. You all were very kind to support our efforts to do the mural there on the south side of the store. I hope people have enjoyed that. It really helps display the history of the town. And I hope you've noticed that we've superimposed Ronnie Brown's face in there. So
I
it's a-
personally want to thank you for doing that. It
well,
meant a lot
we're
to
very
him and his
happy to do it.
family.
Ronnie has been a great friend to the store, and,
Yeah.
and Clay is stepping in and dragging the parking lot for us occasionally now. So thank him too.
Mhm.
But before you will be a request for economic assistance through the Community Development Corporation. The purpose is basically to provide outside lighting to light the mural, to increase the lighting of the front facade. And then you'll notice the request includes actually upgrading our electric panel, because we've got all the circuits we can stand right now. And so we need some help to do this additional lighting. And that's what we will be asking you to look at tonight. I think the CDC approved it unanimously. And if you could look with favor on it, I'd really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Appointed representative liaison reports. Denton County Emergency Service, Jim.
Honorable Mayor, distinguished council members. On the report, I left the main header on the report tonight because I forgot to cover it last time. If y'all noticed, we are well represented on the county emergency services districts commissioner board. We have Jim Carter as the president. We have Stephen Harris as the vice president. And right now we have James Price as secretary, the newest member. So go Bartonville. Production for the month of May, 216 occurrences. It's down quite a few from the prior month, but it's elevated to the prior. Light siren, 1 minute, 13 seconds. Response time, 7 minutes and 3 seconds to arrive. Time on the scene with the number of fires we have was 20 minutes and 47 seconds. And again, Bartonville's average response time was 6 minutes and 54 seconds. We had 17 incidents for the month. One fire, this is a grass fire, no biggie. EMS injury without motor vehicle, 8. I guess we got somebody run over. We had a motor vehicle accident with pedestrian, 1 for the month. But 17 wasn't too bad. Quite a number of fires at the other communities around us. I started it with the word fire, so it kind of jumps out at you. Big news for the month for the ESD, 9,800 followers on Facebook, 15,000 hits on the Saving the Ducks or Ducklings. Y'all familiar with that story? If not, tune into their site and read about Saving the Ducks. And they have the big child safety fair at the Liberty Christian School and consort with the Argyle Police Department. And with that, that's about it, unless you want to get into some money, but we don't need that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Y'all have any questions?
Have any questions, please send me a note. I'm around. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
Chief? Police report?
Mayor, council, staff. There's, you probably may have noticed that in your packet there on your, the agenda packet, that there was 2 charts of the same thing. That was an error on my part for no other reason than just overlooked it. So I supplied you with the other graph, the other chart there, which is medical calls. That's the one I forgot that I overlooked putting in there. So total calls for the month of May, 332. The total calls for the month of April, the previous month, were 307. So they've gone up a little bit. Of those, self-initiated calls to, or self-initiated activity was 241. And of that number, 97 were traffic stops. That number is starting to creep up a little bit. Again, the medical calls, there were 3 there. And then the calls that actually generated a report of some kind, there were 88. So that totaled 332. We had 5 crashes. And the one crash that with the pedestrian was actually when we didn't have an officer on duty and DPS worked that crash. It was a vehicle versus bicycle. So we had 5 crashes total, 3 of which were 407 and Hilltop, same place. 2 were right in the area of 7-Eleven on 407. And then the last one being right in front of Kroger. Flock reads for the month of May, 614,872. Those are our license plate readers that are mounted throughout town. The month of April, there were 690,023. So it went down a little bit. So I was asked to start supplying some numbers as far as cases that we're investigating, things that we're kind of doing behind the scenes. So this month, currently we have, let's see, 4, 6, 8. We have 9 cases, which one just popped up today. So we're actively investigating 9 cases. And of those 9, 4 of those are assaults. 2 of those are thefts. And we have 2 identity thefts. Then we just got a forgery fraud case today. And then we're actively involved in 2 background investigations for possibly future employers or employees for PD. So that's what I got.
I have a quick question. Where was the bicyclist hit?
Right there at Hawk and Porter, or right there by the Montessori, right in
Where
that
they
area.
turn left there to go down Hawk?
I think it was more of a following for a period of time and then wanting to pass.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
And
Any
I think
questions?
there were some minor injuries with that, but nothing
Nothing
more than
major?
that.
Okay, okay. Questions?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Chief.
Town Administrator, Dan?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Mayor and Council. If you'll go to the first page of your financials, the revenues. Again, this is as of May 31st. Sales taxes are at 70%. We're 2/3 of the year through the budget cycle, so you'd expect to see about 67% on average. So we're a little bit faster in that area, which is great. Sales taxes are right along with projections, similar to the last fiscal year as well. And then total sales of mixed beverage taxes are slightly higher than previous year at the end of this period. Property taxes are at about 97% of budgeted collections. It is possible there will be some additional trickle in, but not typically this late. You may see a few additional, so we may miss a little bit on that projection for property tax collections. Franchise fees are about 90% of budget. 3 of the 4 quarterly payments for the franchise payers are in. So again, that's why that's so high. That will probably come in right at budget as opposed to being over just because of where those quarterly payments fall. Let's see, other budgeted funds, transfers. This one, Corey and I talked a long time about this one. 20% of budgeted funds are received here, and that's a decrease from last month. And again, this one is related to the Denton County Development District equipment for Lantana. There was a budget transfer. So again, that money was added in there, but it has not yet been collected. So it was 59,900 that was added into that line item in anticipation of that grant being received. So that's why that collection looks so low. Otherwise, it would be about 85% of budget without that line item in there. Development fees include construction inspection fees for all 3 subdivisions, as well as DRC costs, site plans, and variances. The final invoices calculated for subdivisions will put us over our budgeted revenue for the fiscal year. We are looking at May included follow-up amendment. Oh, sorry. I apologize for that. I missed my comma. We may have a follow-up amendment in July. We had originally, I think we thought we'd bring one in June. Things didn't quite work out that way. So we're looking at a budget amendment that would correct a few other things in addition to this in July. So 124,581 of the construction fees are of the 142,655 in that category. So again, it's substantial. Permits and inspections, that is actually ahead of budget, 93% overall. What is, we have $2,700 more in contractor registrations than previous year. So at this time at the previous year. So lots of contractors. That's one of the things that Tammy spends a lot of time on is getting those registered because of all the construction going on. All those are required to register with the community. Municipal court fines collected are slightly lower than the 67% you'd expect for this time of year. Additional officers, as they come on board, we can see, expect that to go up, but probably not the remainder of this fiscal year. As Chief mentioned, we got 2 positions open, so we may miss a little bit on that one. You have any questions on revenues? If you go to your expenditures next page, again, we'd like to see about 67% or less in expenditures. Administration, actually, we'll look at that one on the next slide. But if you look at the municipal court department, has very small expenditures because it's just the judge and prosecutor. And then in transfers, we've got, that's almost entirely the Lantana Town Center grant. The major annual payment was completed in March of 21, and that's part of the property and sales tax reimbursements. I know we're going to look at that at some point. So if you'll go to your detail on the next page for administration, we'd like to see 30, again, this one shifts a little bit. We want to see 67% or less. On this one, we want to see 33% or more remaining balance. So this one's a little different. I may change these a little bit going forward, but historically, this is what y'all have seen. And I didn't want to change on you day one. All areas within administration remain in excess of that amount, except for contracted services. The contracted services category is for the interim administrator costs. So we're only 22% of budget remaining, but salaries and benefits have over 52% remaining. So again, adjustment, if we look at it in July, we will balance those out to cover that for the remainder of the fiscal year. And then on the next sheet, if you look at expenditures by department, maintenance category, there's several large one-time maintenance contracts, with the larger one being paid in April. Sufficient budget remains to complete the fiscal year based on history, so we shouldn't expect to have any changes there. Contracted services is primarily communications contract with DCSO. Additional costs are related to expenses and screening new employees for PD. Again, Chief mentioned going through 2 of those right now. Sufficient revenue remains on board to onboard an additional officer this fiscal year for the vacancies. The additional category for capital was just added. Again, this is the $59,000 reimbursement grant for law enforcement equipment. And we have not realized that yet, have we, Chief? On that one, is that the $59,000 for law enforcement equipment? That one is, that's the one that has not arrived. Okay. I'll answer any questions y'all may have, and we'll get better and faster.
Chief, that was from Denton County Economic.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, it was for that tourist grant. It has the tower and the clock cameras.
Trailer. Yeah.
For speed sign.
Any idea when government, so it might be.
Any day for the camera. The tower, right. They pushed it out a couple days, but it's maybe this week.
Other questions?
That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Consent agenda. This agenda consists of non-controversial housekeeping items required by law. Items may be approved with a single motion. Items may be removed from the consent agenda by any council member by making such a request prior to the motion and a vote on the consent agenda. Number 1, consider approval of a resolution reappointing a municipal court judge, alternate municipal court judge, and municipal court clerk. Number 2, consider approval of a resolution appointing Jim Carter to the Board of Managers of Denco 911 District. Number 3, consider approval of an agreement with a plan of operations division for the state of Texas, allowing police department participation in the excess Department of Defense personal property transfer program and authorization for the town administration and chief of police to execute the same. Number 4, consider approval of a resolution appointing an emergency management coordinator and assistant coordinator for the town of Bartonville. Do I have a motion to approve items 1 through 4? Thank you. Do I have a second? All those in favor? Motion carries. Presentation Consideration of fiscal 2021, 2022 audit, staff report, that.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Mayor, Council. Local government code states a municipality shall have its records and accounts audited annually and shall have an annual financial statement prepared based on that audit. Bill Spohr is the person who closed out our books this year, provides bookkeeping services for the community, and then for the fiscal year. And then the audit was conducted by MWH Group, and Valerie Halverson is here to present that audit to you tonight.
Hi, nice to see everybody. I'm Valerie Halverson. I'm a shareholder at MWH Group. We're a CPA firm in Wichita Falls. And you probably are familiar with this, but just as a reminder, Bill Spohr used to perform your audits, and we have kind of constantly changing independence rules. And because Bill Spohr is a sole proprietor, and as he's looking to retire, he really didn't meet the same independence requirements. So we kind of shuffled around. We met Bill, our firm met Bill, we were his peer reviewer during his peer review a few years ago. And so he reached out to kind of get us to help perform the audit that he did the cleanup work. So that was how we came to know the city, or the town of Bartonville, excuse me. And so this audit looked different from what you've seen in the past. He was pretty involved with Bill still, but Bill came in and cleaned up the records and did a lot of the preparation work, and then provided those work papers to us. He made a lot of the audit adjustments that he typically made as part of the audit, is now part of the bookkeeping service. And then our firm came in and did an audit of the town's records and really of Bill's adjustments and the work that Bill did. And then Bill prepared the financial statements, and then we reviewed and issued a report thereon. So that's kind of how it differed this year from years past. I usually take this time to just kind of explain how the audit report flows together and how these reports work. I know y'all go over the financial information in detail in each meeting, so I don't necessarily hit on that as thoroughly, but of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. So I'll start by going over this bound report that I handed out at the beginning of the meeting. This is the town's annual financial report. Flipping on to numbered page 1, which is about the 4th page in that document. This is our independent auditor's report on the financial statements. And this is where we provide an opinion on the financial statements themselves. And it says that we believe the financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects, which is what we call an unmodified opinion. And that is as nice as we get as auditors and what you would want to see. And so past that section, just to kind of again show you the sections of this big report, goes into page 4, management's discussion and analysis. This section is intended to kind of discuss how the financial statements work and give you some sort of a little more information on how the numbers work. I like to focus here because it's the only place in the financial statements that present comparative information. So it gives you 2020 and 2021, which I'll point out. So on page 6, you'll see that the town's governmental, your total net position. So this is the town's assets, debt, and net position. Total assets are about 8 million. You're up about 7.2 million from where you were at the end of 2020. Liabilities went down. Total liabilities were at 1.7 million versus 1.8 million. A lot of that is for paying off long-term debt. One thing that you might notice, that current liabilities number went up. It was about by 560,000. It's about 770,000. The biggest piece of that is that the town received funding from the ARPA funding, and that was received really right at the end of the year and not spent yet. And because of that, that's converted into what we call an unearned revenue. So a liability until the town spends it. So it's basically cash held that has to be used for a specific purpose. So that will really convert to revenue next year as those funds are spent. And then that bottom section there is your net position, which is the difference between your assets and liabilities. Is about 6.2 million, up about 820,000 from where you were in 2020. Page 7 then shows comparatives for your changes in that position. Your total revenues are about 2.8 million versus 2.6. The biggest piece of that increase is in sales tax. That has been happily increasing kind of all over, but always good to see it going up. Total expenses increased also about 2 million with some big increases in general government. and some public works with some street projects and depreciation. And so overall, your increase in that position was about 821,000 versus about 1 million last year. But overall, two pretty significant increases for the 2 years. So those two numbers that I just went over were what we call full accrual. So that's where our fixed assets are capitalized and long-term debt is shown as a debt. The next page goes into your fund analysis, and that is your modified basis of accounting. So this is looking at your general fund in a little bit of a different format, but you've kind of gotten the general feel of what happened with the city this year. So in the interest of not being too confusing, those are generally the same with some small adjustments. So that is kind of the MD&A for the most part. And then it goes into the basic financial statements, which starts on numbered page 11. And numbered page 11 is your statement of net position, which is the more detailed version of the number I just quickly went over in the MD&A. But this is, again, your full accrual statement with your fixed assets and long-term debt. Page 12 is your statement of activities. So this is, again, showing a different way to calculate that change in net position of the $821,000 increase. This statement is a little different. It starts with expenses in that first category, and then shows direct revenues and comes down to applied general revenues. So to read this, if you're looking at general government, that first line, you had 982,000 in expenses for general government. Direct charges for services to apply against that were 190,000, just about. So your net cost of just general government was 793,000. If you follow that column down, then you get to start applying your general revenues. So that's your property tax, sales tax, revenues that are collected on not for a specific department. And then that calculates ultimately your change in net position. Governmental sector is the only place I've ever seen that presents a weird statement, the L-shaped statement like this. So I try to kind of make sure that you understand how to follow it through. Page 13 goes into your governmental funds. So this is what we call the modified accrual basis of accounting. So fixed assets are not reported here and long-term debt is not reported here. It's intended to be a current asset and current liability focus. Your general fund ended the year, which is that first column, with unassigned fund balance of about 3.1 million. Your expenditures, so your goal for that is to be about 3 to 6 months of expenditures, or at least 3 months. Your total expenditures for the year were 2 million. So you got a really healthy fund balance there, over a year's worth of expenditures in your general fund balance. Page 14 shows the reconciliation between the two statements. And then page 15 is your statements of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance for your governmental funds. And so the difference here would be fixed asset purchases are considered an expense, long-term debt payments are considered an expense, and debt issuances would be considered a revenue if you had any. So again, focusing on your general fund there, you had an increase of 537,000 in the fund for the year of 2021. And that next page then again is your reconciliation that just takes you from this fund statement to the statement in the front that is full accrual. Page 17 then goes into your footnotes. So this is going to provide your significant accounting policies, some additional details on balances that are included there. There were no new accounting policies implemented during the year, nor changes to existing policies. And they just provide some additional details on your balances. So page 24, note 4 shows the activity in your capital assets. You had $157,000 increased. So fixed asset purchases during the year, depreciation offset that, it's about 330,000. So fixed assets overall decreased by about 175,000. Page 25 shows your long-term debt activity. So you paid $290,000 off in your long-term debt balances, ending with your notes of 910,000. And that next little category shows the payments that go through 2024 on that outstanding debt balance. Note 6 then starts your, by far and away, your longest footnote, which covers the pension footnote, which is again your plan with TMRS. Page 28 shows how that is calculated, which is basically done by an actuary that's hired by the TMRS. And so on page 28, you'll see that column A there in that bottom chart is your total pension liability. So that's the estimate of the town of Bartonville's full liability for the retirees. And then column B shows the assets that are accumulated to pay off that liability. And then that last column is what's actually booked as a liability. It's the difference between the estimated liability and your net pension, and your assets accumulated for it. So 315,000. And that number does fluctuate with the market, with all sorts of things. And really the city's biggest thing is to just continue to pay TMRS the rate that they give you, which you have always done, and we'll just continue to do that. And you'll see some fluctuations in this number, but as long as you're paying your rate, that's the town's responsibility there. And just to highlight on page 29, to show how big of how sensitive this estimate is. So 315,000 is what's recorded right now as your liability using a discount rate of 6.75%. If that went up 1 point or went down 1 point, that number would change pretty dramatically. So just to kind of highlight how sensitive it is to these estimates that are performed by the actuary. Note 7 then goes into your other post-employment benefit. This is also through TMRS. It's the participation in the supplemental death benefit fund. Unlike the pension, supplemental death benefit fund does not have assets accumulated specifically in the city's name. So the liability is actually just the estimate of what the town would owe in the future, and it ended up 35,000. And those are really the most significant footnotes. Past that, on page 34 starts your budgetary comparison schedule. The biggest variance here that I thought you probably should point out to you in revenues. So revenues came in under budget, and a lot of that is in your intergovernmental revenues. So the city did receive that funding from the government, but then we had to defer a lot of it. So you didn't get to count it as revenue this year. It was 220,000. So that really makes up the biggest piece of that difference. And again, that will be revenue in this year as that funding is spent. Past that, there were no major budget overages in any of your departments, which is good news. So ultimately, again, an increase in 537,000. And then the next few schedules cover more detailed information on your pension. Should you want to look at your historical pension activity, it is there. And then the supplemental schedules are your budgets to actuals for your other funds, which are not a required part of the statement, but included here. And then finally, on page 43 is what we call the compliance section. So we performed an audit in accordance with government auditing standards, and with that audit, we're required to issue a report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance. So we're required here to report if we have identified any internal control issues or any non-compliance. We did not identify any, so that is what this report says, that we didn't identify any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. And that is, in a nutshell, what is in this bound report. Does anybody have any questions or want me to go over any? Yes, sir.
I have just a couple quick questions. It looks like our current portion of long-term debt was about 300,000 a year.
Yes, sir.
Is all of that debt scheduled amortizing? Or?
Can you ask me that one more time?
I'm sorry, on that whatever that 1.2 million in long-term debt.
Yes, sir.
Is all of that amortizing debt? Is there any interest only type things, or is it all scheduled?
It's all scheduled.
Okay.
It's all scheduled. Yeah. And there's, a principal and interest portion each year.
Are there any material leased assets that this town has?
No, that's a tax note for the roads that we took out. That's
Okay.
what that is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. No, there are
Nothing
no
on lease.
leases.
No, I mean, I think vehicles are owned, and I think all right. Thank you.
Good shape financially. The TMRS, is that a yearly payment?
It comes out every payroll. So
All right.
they give us the percentage rate.
Okay.
And so when the letters go out, we adjust that rate January 1 of each year.
Okay.
So when payroll is processed is when that percentage is paid each pay period.
Okay.
And we budget that each year.
Okay. Jim, did you have any other questions? Any questions? Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Number 6, public hearing zoning.
We have a motion, consideration, so presentation considerations, we need a motion to accept.
Oh, do I have a motion to accept the audit? Right?
Make a motion to accept the audited financial report.
All those in favor? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Number 6, public hearing, zoning text amendment, new and unlisted use event center or event venue. Continue public hearing and consideration of the ordinance amending the Town of Bartonville Code of Ordinances, Chapter 14, Exhibit A, zoning ordinance related to new and unlisted use for event venue or banquet hall. Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval by vote of 5-0 at its May 4th, 2022 meeting. Time being, we've already opened it. Okay, public hearing for the item was open on May 17th. Staff report.
This is, again, a text amendment. Y'all will not be approving an event center or anything tonight. You're considering just the, making that text amendment to your use tables. And again, this is specifically event venue banquet hall. It's not similar to any of the other land uses. I think y'all have already seen all that, but I'll answer any questions you may have on from the staff perspective.
Explain that to me again. I think what we're doing is amending the land use table. Is that correct?
Is that, yes, it's the allowable uses within the table of in this
So
category.
It doesn't exist at this moment.
It does not exist at this
So if
time.
we were to approve that, and it would allow.
It would allow that to come
whoever
forward.
move forward.
By
Yes, sir.
conditional use
By
permit only.
yes, by conditional use permit only, which again, council and P and Z have a lot of flexibility on that process as well.
I think whenever we're amending or looking at amending the land use table, we need to be thoughtful and considerate in doing that, because what we're now saying is that this would be an acceptable property use for a particular site. And am I correct that this is only limited to the village center?
That is my understanding. Yes, Corey, I'm
Ed,
going
is
to
that
lean on you a
correct?
little bit. That is correct.
Okay, I don't know that Ed can hear us.
Oh, Ed, sorry. I thought you said that. I
No,
apologize.
Yes, that would be only there.
Applicant presentation. Can you hang on a minute, Keith? And let
Sure.
Applicant. Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Doug Powell with McAdams, 111 Hillside Drive in Louisville. We also office in Roanoke. I do have a presentation, a couple slides. I've added one since we were here last month, but I know really you wanted to talk to Marty about maybe some of the operational issues that would happen if we came back, you approved this and we came back with a conditional use permit. And so, well, I have a.
Just a sec, is the clicker up there?
Oh.
Give me just a second. Yeah, I'm trying.
We'll discuss it in a minute. Yeah.
My apologies. What's that? Well, yeah, it's not gonna let me, but we'll get through it, so. Yeah, I know it's not letting me. not letting you move it. No. This one? We need Matt, yeah, we close that.
It's, okay. Makes sense.
It's stuck on the screen, my apologies. We were having technical difficulties earlier. It won't even let me close that.
Yeah.
No, it's still. Will work. Yep. It'll work. He hasn't. Oh, with the remote. Let's put it on this one. Well, then I gotta take that screen off. It's gonna work. Is it on that that screen?
It looks like it might be.
Turn that screen to me for a minute, because it's not. Ah, well, there we go. It's because it's not showing up here.
Once your cursor's there, just click OK.
Yeah, I see it. It wasn't showing up on here. Didn't see it behind me. There we go. My apologies.
Nice.
That's why we have a technical person here. This is not happening before.
Send your bill to town hall.
No kidding. So it's running, we'll go here. Share our screen so the public can see. There you go. Thank you. I would have seen it.
Thank you. So this is just an overview map that shows the location of the property in blue. It's directly south of Marty B's. It's directly to the west of 7-Eleven. We also showed that its proximity to Hudson Ranch that was discussed at the P&Z meeting. It doesn't seem like it wants to advance. It was working, but. Yeah, and this is just closer in, show you the location. One of the constraints of this property is the overhead power line that's shown in the red. Also, even though it actually extends out to the road, it has this floodplain that you're not going to get access. So the only access is onto Neely Road back behind 7-Eleven. It really is a poor piece of property in terms of retail development because there's no visibility, no access. This is the concept plan that we put together for Marty. I know it's very hard to see, but along the outside, the back portion on the west and the south, there are 5-foot berms that'll be landscaped. Marty really doesn't anticipate to have outdoor music. There might be a guitar player with someone having a ceremony out there, but it's really not going to be amplified sound out there. But we will have these landscape berms, so even people congregating out there, the noise is not going to travel far. And we oriented the building too, that it's pointing away from the neighbors. Again, you have that big expanse to the south of the overhead power lines. At P&Z, the question was asked, well, why is this different than the one that was turned down a couple of years ago? And the biggest difference is the size. It's half the size. Marty's not going to have kitchens. The operation really be as restaurants come over. You see that there's gravel parking. That's an opportunity for Marty to park his employees. That we're kind of running out of space with Cloud9 opening and stores, restaurants going into the center, that the existing parking north of Marty B's is kind of being eaten up. And this would be an opportunity to have that overflow parking for his employees. This is the elevations. Think that they're very nice, very low scale, keep and fitting with what's out there. This is the slide that it was talked about at P&Z, but these are the permitted uses in the village center by right. There's a whole list of uses that are conditional. But just to go through some of the ones that I think are interesting by right, and I didn't highlight the first couple, I should have. Alcohol beverages, retail sales, ambulance service, auto body repair, auto repair service, tobacco store, retail, cleaners, daycare, convenience store with gasoline sales. There might not be one because of 7-Eleven, but you could do that by right. A feed store, grocery store, hardware store, a lot of retail stores, private club, a restaurant, sit down, a school, sexually oriented business is a permitted use. Studios dance. My daughter danced for 16 years. There's a lot of traffic in dance studios, and it's constant, even on Saturday. Studios Health Club, athletics, studios, martial arts, veterinarian, and the last one is wedding planning, no outside facilities or services. And so, again, those are uses that could be on that site with a building permit site plan, and not come before the council for any kind of approval. And we would argue that what he's doing with this wedding venue is really going to be lower intensity than most of those uses I just read off. As your town administrator pointed out, what you're acting on tonight is to add the use in your table of uses for the village center, but it's not a permitted use like these uses, it's a conditional use, which means we have to come back and show you a plan and talk about the operations, and you can add conditions to those conditional use permits. So you still have a lot of leeway in what happens on the site, but this is the first step in allowing us then to come back and make application for that conditional use permit. Can you hit one more? There, oh, it's working now. And this just shows that same concept plan again with the entirety of the property. You see how far that sits from the adjacent properties, and again, it's pointed away from the neighborhood to the west. And we think it'd be a nice addition to the town of Bartonville in this area. And again, we happy to answer any questions. And unfortunately, Marty couldn't be here last time. He's here today, and I'm sure you have questions for him. But I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
What's the size of the total property? Is it 15 acres? Is that right?
Yes.
Give or minus.
Yeah.
And then how many acres is this picture we're seeing right here?
That I think is only 3-4 acres.
So what's the rest? I know you got power lines and floodplain. Is it just going to be kind of left as it is, like field and whatever?
Yeah, right now, the only thing you can do, you can put parking under there, but you cannot put any structures. You can't even put light poles, right? So if you did a parking lot out there, you could not put, light poles. And so you can't plant trees, right? What the power companies will let you do is very, 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 very limited. But we should be able to park under it.
Outside of that, it'll pretty much stay the way that it is.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're limited. Yeah, that in the floodplain, and you can't touch that floodplain either.
What's the capacity for this building?
Yeah, I'd say it's right under, I knew it was right under 300.
Go ahead and,
Is that about half what it originally was, Marty? Okay. Oh,
Sorry, it doesn't, Ed can't hear, so can anybody walking?
Marty Brown, 913 Hat Creek, Martinville. Yeah, so we basically took the footprint and shrunk it considerably. A couple of reasons. One is, as I've done research on event centers, we found that the magic number is really about 150 to 200. That seems to be what most event sizes are. And I think a lot of it's due to, the people that are hosting the event are usually paying for it, right? And as costs go up, they're like, you have to be very selective about who you're inviting to your wedding now. So as we've evolved, we just thought, it'd be smarter for us to shrink the footprint, reduce the traffic, and then, just be able to maximize the space on that. So.
Well, you mentioned something that the type of a venue that you're planning is going to be relatively low impact compared to what the other uses are permitted now. This is a wedding venue. It's a party venue. How's it going to be lower impact than some of the other uses?
I'll give you kind of some perspective. On any given Saturday, we'll usually have about 3,000 customers at Marty B's. If we're going to have an event there, they have it for the whole day. So if they have 296 at max capacity, or let's just say that's what the number is, even though that probably wouldn't be the average, you're talking about, not to even include the traffic in and out of 7-Eleven, a very significant low percentage of the overall traffic in that space already. We all know that if you've been to a wedding lately, I was just at one 2 weeks ago. When the wedding's over or the event's over, not everybody leaves at once. I'm older now. I'd like to leave a little earlier. The young people like to stay, throw rice, do sparklers, and see them into their car. The last wedding event I attended, there were 400 people there. I think there were 50 of us there at the end. So I think that's pretty typical in the wedding events that I've been to. One thing I will say, Keith, is that, when you have an event like this and you draw up a contract to outline what's expected of the user, there's so much language you can put in there that puts the incumbency on the event, on the person who's using it. So if at some point, traffic became an issue, then that's just something we draw into the language of the contract. So we don't typically have a lot of weddings on Monday and Tuesday. Certainly happy to do it. People want to do that, but my intention, we've been booking events at Marty B's for 4.5 years. And so one of the things we've learned is that there's a lot of events we don't book at Marty B's, either because of our upstairs space. It has stairs, no elevator. It's not heated and cooled throughout the whole entire year. So we lose events because of that, especially if they're over, a couple hundred people or even 100 or less, based on those things I was telling you about. So we feel that the intended use would be for weddings. It would be for banquets, galas, sports banquets, conferences. There's a lot of uses that we could look into this that would, I feel like, add a lot of value to the community. There's only one other event space I know within 3 to 4 mile radius, and that's Hidden Pines over there in Highland Village. It's slap dab in the middle of a neighborhood, behind a bank, next to a pharmacy, next to baseball fields, neighborhoods right behind it. Here, my closest neighbor's pretty far away, and the way we've placed the facility is placed in such a way that it would have low impact on the community.
You're going to have future neighbors that are going to be not that far away from it.
That's correct.
They're not going to be that far away from Marty B's. So not only am I worried about existing residents in Saddlebrook relative to noise, traffic, even potential cut through traffic through our interiors, as depending on where people are coming from. But those residents that are going to ultimately be moving into Hudson Hills. And I don't know what is Hudson Hills, is it already sold out there? What impact does that have for the developer on being able to sell some of the units, especially the ones that are closest to the facility? Now, if it's primarily indoors, then that may be one thing. I know you've mentioned, the music would be indoors. You wanted the ability to have some music outside. I actually went out to Hudson Hills Saturday night at 8 o'clock, and I sat up on the top of the hill. I could hear the words to the music. I couldn't imagine if I was living in one of those houses right behind there. And then if you add a facility that it's a wedding venue, a party
It may
venue.
deafen the sound at Marty B's. Could be a big advantage.
Well, yeah,
Depends on how you look at it, Keith.
yeah, but that's another venue that's going to be potentially a noise generator, and that's
Noise generator, define that.
well, you've not only through potentially for music if it's outdoors.
No outside music.
Okay, and then your guests that show up there, what control are you going to have over to keep them indoors? They may want to congregate in the parking lot or on the back patios or whatever.
Well, and
Groups
and
of
what if the
people-
people in the neighborhood, then Hudson Hills want to have a gathering outside their backyard? What's the difference?
Well, they might not be able to. They would be drowned out potentially.
Marty, weren't you
So-
also talking about having security in the parking lot?
Yeah, I mean, I think, that's the interesting thing. Here's what we're talking about. We're basically talking about an event center in an area that's already clearly defined as Village Center. Can another event center be placed anywhere else in Bartonville if it's not in the Village Center? No, cannot. The other thing we're talking about is, I'm sitting here listening to Doug. I can't believe I bought the piece of property, to be frank with you. I mean, who the hell else was going to buy it? I mean, it sat there for 4 years, Keith. Nobody came slamming down the door to buy the property. It's a terrible, miserable investment. I still can't believe I did it.
I can appreciate the difficulties. I can't.
So, my desire is to do something. We talk about it all the time in my business. How do we add value? How do we add value to the town of Bartonville by building something that could be really complementary? I had 3 goals in mind. So 2 of them I felt like probably weren't feasible. We looked at doing a hotel there. I felt like that would probably be more difficult to get through the town than this. We looked at doing an equestrian center. I'm a cowboy, I'm a roper, team rope, and I thought it'd be cool to have a place to have an arena, do events, do some retail. And that was going to generate significantly more traffic than the event center. So out of all the things I considered, I even thought about doing a retail development, but a retail development is 7 days a week, 9 a.m. till say 9 or 10 p.m. at night. And so, that's even more significant traffic and probably significantly more sound. And so the good news about what you all are doing tonight is you're just granting a use to it. When you go and you add a conditional use permit, collaboratively we're working together to create a space where everyone wins. And as a resident of Bartonville, I live in Hat Creek, I can hear my music too. I can also hear planes flying over. I can hear motorcycles traveling down 407. I can hear donkeys neighing. I don't complain about it. It's part of living next to a large community in Lantana and all the things that are around us. And so ultimately, if we get this designated as a use, I would want to be, collaborative on the conditional use, but not drown it out so much that it reduces my ability to make money on it, right? Because it's going to be significantly expensive to develop it. I mean, 2 years ago, just my development bill was $2.5 million. That's before I even went vertical. That's just to put in the parking, the drainage, the landscaping. That was, what was that, Doug? 3.5 years ago? 3.5 years ago. And I still bought it. I mean, so all I'm asking for, Keith, is a chance to do something really cool. And, it was different with Marty B's because I came in and Saddlebrook was there. Has it been a challenge? Absolutely. But you guys represent all of Bartonville. You don't represent a neighborhood. You represent all of Bartonville. And I think there's over 1,700 people here. And I would say out of the 1,700 people, I'd say a big chunk of them are pretty happy with me and kind of enjoy the things we do. I always say when people aren't at work and they're not at home, everything they do outside of that space defines their lifestyle. I'm in the lifestyle business. We want to create spaces for people to enjoy their life, celebrate life's special moments, and getting married is a pretty big deal. Having a sports banquet for your high school, your middle school, that's a big deal, right? And so to be able to have a space that's in the community, I think is going to be awesome. In relation to the sound, I don't think anybody's worked harder to accommodate the concerns of the community than me. Can you hear my music? Yes, you can hear my music. Do you know how many citations I've been given for breaking the sound ordinance, Keith, in 4.5 years? Yeah, exactly. So the ordinance.
You're not in compliance with your conditional use permits and all of that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that this will create an additional noise component, or could potentially create an
If I could-
additional noise component.
If I
I
could
have to
back
be
up,
mindful
I'm
of
sorry.
the other the future residents.
But my point is-
Bartonville as well.
They're buying the property knowing I'm there. And I know the developers, I know the home builders, and the home builders tell me that they tell their clients to go out there and sit on their space and listen.
Okay.
I mean, that sounds like smart business to me. If I'm selling that property, the lots aren't cheap.
No, they're not.
Now, I will tell you that the guy that bought the 2 lots behind me is my friend. And I'm very grateful that he bought those 2 lots.
Well, lucky for you.
You know, they're gonna have a water feature behind the other 2 lots that are 2/3 taken up by water. I think the water's gonna drown out some of the sound. But when I'm at my house, you know what I do? If I hear music that I hear sounds that I'm not happy with, I play my own music. I figure out a way to enjoy my space, and I don't let my surrounding dictate my joy and my happiness. Right. And so people have to, no one's guaranteed silence.
Not all people are the same. Not all people are Marty.
I understand.
Some
I
people,
understand.
they're coming to Bartonville. They want to buy their little piece of the country. They want to be able to
Yeah.
sit out on their back porch and listen to the sounds of
And do
nature.
council discussion.
Maybe a donkey braised, but it's not braying for 3 hours or 4
Keith-
hours. What it's
Keith,
gonna
excuse
do.
me, let me finish with, if you don't mind, with just the public hearing part here, and then we're
Sure.
going to discuss some more in a minute. Thank you, Marty,
Okay.
for your
Yeah,
time. I
pleasure.
really appreciate you answering
I'm
questions.
happy to answer other questions. I know there's
Thank you.
other folks
Thank
on
you.
the council.
Does anyone want to speak in favor? Anyone want to speak in opposition? So at 7:59, we'll close the public hearing. Council discussion now. We'll discuss, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was just, the biggest thing I come back to, I think about everything that we look at is it good for Bartonville and the people of Bartonville?
Oh, you're welcome.
And with what we're being asked tonight to have event centers. We haven't had event centers here in the past, and obviously predates me. I don't know the rationale or the reason behind why we didn't. But I'm just trying to figure out why having an event center in our little town is good. I mean, I think it's gonna be good for a lot of people outside our town that come in here. But for the people that live here and for our property values and for the noise pollution, and I get it. I know it's not a perfect world. But I don't think adding more noise pollution to noise pollution is a good thing either. Biggest concern I've probably got is anytime you got 300 people that are partying, regardless when they leave, if it's later in the evening, it's going to put stress on our police force. So those are kind of my concerns about just having an event center.
He's going to have security, and that'll all be set up in the CUP, of course, too. Yeah, thank you.
Having been involved with on the DRC, I kind of got a little bit of an insight by knowing what he's already went through to try and explain a lot of things. But if you look at that 14 acres back here, there's not much you can do with 14 acres because that's a trash hill, and I wouldn't invest in it. But having said that, Marty's got a vision. But the great thing about that area back there is, and the developer hit upon it, if you go up and you look at that, there's nothing you can do out there. But boy, I'll tell you what, it would be a nice place to park vehicles. And I know one thing he's going to have is going to be vehicles out there. If you go on a Thursday or Friday or Saturday night, you'll see them vehicles out there. I don't know how you're going to keep parking them on top of each other, but that would be a great way of using that land out there. Now, also that brings up a problem, and he's addressed this with DRC to some degree, is on is providing security and enforcement of safety out there, concerns of an evening, and trying to address some of this traffic going in and out there off of 407. So that's something that he can address it at some point in time. We'll have to. But if you look at that land, there's not much you can do with that land that's going to be beneficial to Bartonville that we're going to be able to capitalize on. It's pretty well limited as to what you can and cannot do because of those power lines.
The security is only going to be limited to his property.
Yeah.
So once they're off site, then they become the problem of Bobby if they're not behaving. And I'm not worried about what could go right with a facility like this, because what could go right is not a problem for you or the town of Bartonville. What I'm worried about is what could go wrong. And one being the noise, one being the traffic. Because if you're going out of IT Neely trying to make a left on the 407, you're having to navigate 2 lanes of traffic And I know it's only 10% increase, but another number is 150 cars. So that's another 150 opportunities for something to happen, and you can't protect against everything. I'm not naive. So that's a concern that I have. Another question I have is the types of events that are going to be had here. Is this something, can I ask Marty a direct question during this
Go ahead.
time, or?
Go ahead.
Well, when you're doing just the use, the text. So even if he told you tonight, well, it might be this or that, when he comes back, he'd have to submit a conditional use permit, and that's when you can say yes, no, or whatever.
What I'm trying to identify is what is an event? You know, what would that classify? What I have heard from Marty and his people is, you know, it's going to be weddings and banquets, you know, social functions for schools, graduations, things of that nature. I know also Marty is heavy into the philanthropic charitable component within our community, and he may want to have some functions there. When I read there's a proposed definition that's in our agenda, and one thing that it says is it's for a private event function. So that's kind of what I'm trying to get to is, you know, is a charitable event, is that a private event function, or is that something that's opened up to the general public?
So that's really not really what we're trying to do, or we're asking about is changing the zoning from ag to RE2. That's what I have on my agenda. Is that what we're doing?
You're not changing the zoning.
Okay, that's what's on mine.
Yeah, on
So
mine is we're.
what is the motion then? Or
Finish your discussion. I'll finish.
Matt, do you or Josh have comments?
Can you go back on the slide deck to those uses that are available by right? Do you have that clicker, Tammy, if you could jump back? So the reason I wanted to look at that again is the concern that I have in a lot of those things, we're talking about noise mitigation, we're talking about traffic mitigation, we're talking about risk mitigation for the property, that the utilization of those 4 acres. By right, many of those, the highlighted ones include, as well as several others, we're gonna have a much larger impact on that little corner of our town than this proposed event center. And this is just the definition. We put a conditional use permit, those are by right.
Right.
We have no say in that.
Right.
The conditional use permit contingency on this definition that we're looking to add gives us the ability to have this debate as long as we need to make sure that we're protecting the town.
Right.
But those are scary.
I don't
Those
disagree.
are by right.
I don't disagree with you on that. I don't, but what I want to understand is, for instance, at this particular facility, could he lease it out to a music promoter? And then that music promoter bring a band to perform in-house and then sell tickets? To me, that's not a private event.
That wouldn't be outdoors.
It wouldn't be outdoors, but could he do that?
Is that something that we can?
Because
I believe that there's a use that in our ordinance, something like that would be prohibited in the current ordinances.
Then I'll be part of the CUP anyway. Right?
Yeah, that'd be part of the CUP.
So those are things that
Yeah.
if it truly is going to be a private event function, then
okay.
if we were to do that, to put some definition around being a private event function
Mhm.
and then what a private event function is.
Marty,
I was gonna say is. Can you go?
speak at them.
There's something you'd like me to build? What do you want me to do?
That's not my job.
Well, you're sure making it your job not to let me build what I want to build. So what do you want me to build?
Don't take it personal. Don't
I'm
take it
not-
personally.
I'm not
Marty.
taking it
This
personal,
is-
Keith.
I'm trying to look out for the
I
residents as
totally
well.
get it. So am I. I deal with them every day. On that, so.
Josh,
Yeah, I personally have no issue with the use,
okay.
especially because it comes back to us through the CUP and we have control through a process. And
Okay.
that's the reason.
All right, thank you. Do I have a motion to approve an ordinance to add the text amendment?
I'll make a motion that we approve to add events as an acceptable use.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Motion carries 3-2.
Those in opposition. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Motion
Welcome.
passes.
Thank you.
Number 7, discussion on residential street project. Chris?
No, y'all should have at your place the printed copy. I had Chris update with engineering and bidding costs as well. So again, that's why it's different than what's in your package. This is more closely an all-in cost if you're going to look at doing a budget amendment or looking going forward on a cost. Chris, go ahead, please.
So, just kind of a little overview. Excuse me. Over the last several months, we've gone through and done more or less a condition report on several of the town streets. I've met with Clay and Josh and also Randy Van Alstyne previously, just to kind of go through and look at the methodology, look at how we were evaluating everything. Earlier this spring, we did a work order for crack sealing and a few spot repairs in town. And that was kind of to address some of the more major things that were more immediate need, I guess you could say. And what we're looking at here, which is a proposed work order, it's actually the second sheet under this agenda item. It represents 2 reconstruction roads, which would be East Jeter, between the second curve and the third curve. And the next page down will have a map of that area. But I wanted to highlight in this estimate, there is that one, which we look at reconstructing with the GeoGrid. We did several test sections a few years ago on Jeter, right at the north corner of town. And we've been watching how that's performed over the last couple of years, and we've been pretty happy with how we've seen it against the line and some of the other treatments. So we propose to have that as part of this reconstruction. And then also reconstructing Stonewood for about the first 700 feet west of Porter, where you're kind of coming up that hill and you're getting up to the intersection, and that's all in poor condition, and there's some failure along the edge. And so since that has a lot less traffic, we would be looking at reconstructing that without a GeoGrid as a cost savings. And then the rest of these roads, you can see on here, we would look at doing a microsurface. If you're not familiar with that, the town did this several years ago at Posto. We've actually had an intergovernmental agreement with North Richland Hills where we use their unit prices to have a company called Internet come in and do streets in the past. And particularly one of the advantages of the microsurface is
Ed back.
a much thinner.
Ed. I'm sorry. I was just trying to get Ed's picture back on. Sorry.
Why is that one?
I'm sorry, Chris.
That's okay. You want to wait so everyone can see?
No, go ahead.
I can hear.
Okay. All right.
There you go.
So one of the particular advantages of microsurface is a much thinner surface. So we don't have to worry nearly as much about tying in all the driveways again. We don't have that roll on the edge of pavement. And the company that provided the quote, we actually went out there, we evaluated all the streets in this quote and looked at different approaches, different types of sealants, different small surface approaches. And so as part of this process, and this cost is included with these totals, before they come out and do the microsurface, we would have our maintenance contractor, SPI, come out and do spot repairs on any of the major base failures, as well as crack sealing on these roads before the microsurface comes in and just caps it. So the microsurface is specific for that one thing. And then we'd use the town maintenance contractor to kind of come in before that and more or less prep the roads for this work. And so I guess if there's any questions on this first page, at the bottom of it, you can see what was recommended for each particular street, as well as under additional items. These were just some other considerations that have been talked about recently, which is replacing the culvert on Gibbons just north of Seals there. We definitely have some pavement repairs that need to happen at McMakin and 407 where there's some base failures. And then there's some other culvert repairs on Post Oak that are required as part of our TxDOT review. So TxDOT comes out and inspects our major culverts, and they had recommended repairs for us to do at that location.
Chris, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
On that culvert there on Gibbons and Seals,
Yeah.
is that the one that you and I looked at that,
Yes. So it's all collapsed on the ends. It's an
Yep.
old corrugated metal pipe. It's basically rusting out
Yep.
as much as anything.
It's in bad shape.
And so we'd be looking at more or less replacing it in kind. There's not any sort of drainage issue that we've known or that I'm aware of in that area. So we'd replace it in kind, and there's the opportunity to lower it a little bit. If you guys have been out there, you've seen the ditches, you know, there's room, so we would lower it, which allows for some better drainage on the upstream side, on the seal side coming down into it. And also allow us to get a little bit more pavement on top of it. So it'll give us a better finish of the roadway when it's all done as well.
but that culvert would have to come completely out. and
Tear the whole thing out, and we'd
Okay.
come back with a concrete, with an RCP culvert as opposed to metal.
Then is, you remember the other one that we looked at, which is north of there, about another 250 yards or so past Seals Road? Where the drainage problem is there, where it backs up because of the,
So that's the one I'm talking about.
okay, so that is the one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
where
On
it's
maps.
the
It's just
the
south of
downstream
that.
drains essentially into the private
Yeah,
property.
because
It
that-
kind of works its way
That's
south of the
gonna
house.
remedy that problem for that property owner.
It'll,
because-
it'll allow them to lower all their driveway culverts and
Where the water gets out on the road,
Yeah.
right there.
Yep, yep. It'll improve that whole area is what it'll, do. Well, it'll improve the cross culvert. It'll give the opportunity to the private residents
Right,
to
to-
improve the drainage
To
along
be
the
able
frontage
to
of their
improve it, Yeah,
homes.
because that's my concern. The other, what about the one that's south of there? The one that's got about the 2.5 inch fall that go when you go across it there at Steels at the corner. of Seals.
Directly under seals.
Yeah,
So I wasn't initially, I'm not planning on touching that right now.
Okay.
Because once the seals itself isn't the issue, it's everything coming down off of there.
right.
And so up to seals, it seems to drain pretty well. And then
Yeah.
after it gets under seals, then it starts to stall out. And so by creating more fall on the cross culvert, we lower that, and that brings that whole ditch down coming into it.
Had you looked at what it would require in order to build that area up though, on that, the one that's south there at the corner across from the Seals and the corner of Gibbons there at Jeter? The culvert there that's, Yeah.
On Jeter, the one on Jeter?
It's sunken in. You're talking about where it's, the pavement's dropped a little
yeah,
bit.
the pavement is dropped.
They were
Okay,
talking about repairing that.
yeah,
It's right
So-
after you turn right onto Gibbons.
yeah,
Is that what
yeah.
you're talking about?
Can that be repaired without having to actually pull all that out and rework that? Is what I'm
It
asking.
can be.
can.
The hard part there is gonna be for the contractor, if they're not gonna disturb that culvert,
Yep,
to get good compaction around it when they go to put everything back, something like that. If, you know, our goal is to get rid of that hump, we'd want to consider coming back with like a flowable fill, like a lightweight concrete.
Alright.
And then just filling it in and
Okay.
then capping it. So it's definitely something we can do. I don't have a cost estimate for that in here.
Well, and I was just, the reason I'm throwing that at is because if you look at all these numbers, and I've driven these locations, of course, you and I looked at several of these, but also the one that we discussed on there on Stonewood there on that corner, would that include fixing that corner?
This one does include that. So with all these roads that are included here, as part of the total includes those base repairs. And so that area would be something that we'd base repair as well. We'd repair that. You're talking
Okay.
about, yeah,
Yeah, where the tree is there and the
Yeah.
stop sign where the culvert is, it drops off, you got about a 2.5 foot fall.
yes.
You're talking
Okay.
about widening it, the pavement there, so you can make
Yeah,
a right
going-
turn?
Yeah, there by that tree
Yeah.
where the stop sign is.
Okay. Yes. So with the reconstruction, we can widen that south side
Okay.
to pull it
Good.
farther away from
Yeah.
the tree. Yes.
Because I know if you look at these numbers and you just do a simple math, you know, things are not going to get any cheaper. If we continue to kick the can down the road, if the funds can be spent now, and we're gonna save, let's say 10%, then all of a sudden we're saving, that's another $100,000. So it just depends on, what we want to collectively do in order to repair what we've got out there, because it's not gonna heal itself. It'll only get worse. And the longer we wait to do it, the more it's gonna cost us to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually a big factor on why we're looking at a microsurfaces, because a lot of the streets, they've got these spot issues, but overall the base is in pretty good shape.
Right.
But the asphalt is just brittle, it's worn out, and it needs something to help protect it and extend the life. So these microsurfaces will probably extend the life in the range of 7 to 10 years. So it's not a end all be all, but it takes care of some of our more severe problems so we can look at how we want to focus moving forward.
That culvert on Stonewood and Jeter, how much easement do we have to work with there before we start encroaching onto someone's property?
So because that one crosses right under the edge of the road there, we have right of way there. So we can extend that as far as we need. What we're going to want to do is we're going to put new head walls on there. And since we're pushing it away by widening that radius return, what we need to be careful of is off of Porter, it doesn't drop off too fast. And so that'll just be something that we need to look at. But as far as extension, we kind of have all the room we need.
So a couple of weeks ago, Chris and I were driving around looking at the roads. We spent about 3 hours looking at all this, and this is kind of sticker shock, because this is the most we've ever really spent. But we're adding the GeoGrid now in terms of, we have this section of road, basically from the on the corner, goes around the S curve down to Gibbons, which is a really terrible piece of road. And it's really bumpy, even at 20 miles an hour, it's pretty bumpy in there. So we need to put GeoGrid on most of it. We thought about doing it in 3 sections, a third each year, because it is so expensive to do. So that's why we have about 1,500 feet of it in here right now.
So if you go to the third page of the agenda, it shows the street history, kind of what we've done over the years. And all of these locations are highlighted on that. That one. Yeah, that one right there. So basically the areas that we're looking at improving are highlighted on here, and on Jeter, you can see just west of Porter is what we're talking about, coming through that first curve and then going north, but stopping short of that second curve. And that was more or less just looking out there and saying, if we handle this over the next several years, this is a good break point. This has got some of the worst areas, and it looks like a good spot to start.
New construction, the GeoGrid is going to start right there at the end of that 2003 overlay and go through the eastern.
No, so everything highlighted within that 2003 overlay, you see how it's kind of purplish? That's the area we're going to do. The 2003 overlay, all these are just notes of when the last time the town did something at that location.
So on the previous map, it shows through the S curve with the GeoGrid. I just want to make sure I understand which portion of the road we're fixing.
Yeah.
I drive it every day.
Purple, that section.
So just that section.
So you're looking at what we got handed, right?
Yeah, I was looking at this one.
Yeah,
which
we
if you go
Had
up a
it
slide,
east-west.
Oh, okay.
So
makes more sense when you rotate the map just a little bit.
So basically, Matt, this year, we're going to start right past Porter at the curve and then go to Bayard Farms, to cut off the Bayard Farms, and then take another third and then another third, or maybe 4 sections. I don't know. It may end up being 4 years to do this. I don't know. Because it's pretty,
Yes,
it's
doing that one first.
Why did we get this?
Yeah,
Why don't we get this?
No, I've got the map oriented correctly and I'm still confused. I'm sorry.
Well,
There's 2 different
don't look at
maps.
this one.
Yeah, there's
Don't look at that one.
Look at
Yeah.
this one.
Look at the purple.
Yeah.
So the
I
one
feel
you're
better
looking
now.
at,
If that
is-
map's just bad, that's all I need to know. I'm good now. Thank you.
I skipped the middle map. The middle map was just it's titled 2002 pavement maintenance program. So this was the condition report. So all those colors represent the different conditions of the road. The one right before that now.
in the red's the portion
Yeah.
now, Jeter. It's pretty ragged.
So
Drive it every day,
Yeah,
every day.
it is bumpy.
Yeah, so this one was the results of doing the townwide evaluation of all the streets. And then the next page is basically saying, all right, this is a history of everything we've done over basically since 1998. And the purpose of this was really to just show that, you know, these have been the focus areas over the years, and the spots that are highlighted, it's kind of their turn too, as much as anything.
Any other questions?
The herbicide, is it just Roundup? Is that what they use? Or do you know?
I don't have a good answer for that yet. I actually met with the county yesterday on a different project, and they're trying to get one of their employees licensed now to do that, so they can start doing that again. Because if you go to the photos, the next couple of pages, one of the things that will be the town's responsibility is coming in and treating all those weeds that have kind of grown up on those last couple of feet, and then clearing that out. And so we've just been looking at a couple of different vendors that are capable of doing this, trying to get some prices and get somebody that can come out and do this work.
And Mayor, if we could, when you are finished with discussion, get direction. This is not a consideration and action, so no vote. But we can start putting that. I can work with Chris and we can put something together to get started. If y'all are. And again, this is a great way to feed into y'all's budget discussion coming up as we talk about the plan moving forward as well.
Sure. Were we also talking about rumble strips on the curves?
I didn't have that as an item, but that's definitely something that we can talk about.
Is there a difference in like rumble strips that really like make you like shake your car loose compared to the rumble strips that are not, that you just notice to slow up, you know?
So what we would be looking at, as you're approaching a stop sign and you get that first rumble strip that's 200-300 feet away, we'd be looking at something very similar to that. And so the discussion was on Jeter, where we're coming up some of those tight curves, possibly installing rumble strips, some additional safety warning lines, chevrons or whatever to help
on the curves,
help kind of bring awareness to those.
Some of those curves are pretty tight together, so you're gonna have short landing on those
Very
strips.
Yep. So what we basically do is space them out almost in between for a couple of those areas, because they are just long enough to get up to speed before you slow down into the next one.
Thank you. Number 8, discuss and consider approval of resolution concerning the approval of type B economic development project performance agreement by and between Bartonville Community Development Corporation and Blue Pup Pub LLC. Tammy?
Technical difficulties here. Well, as Tim House mentioned during public participation, he submitted a grant request to the Bartonville Community Development Corporation for electrical improvements. The amount of the grant request was $9,900. Again, it's for interior and exterior, adding circuits, adding new breakers. And the Community Development Corporation voted to approve it. And then at their last meeting, they voted to approve a resolution, an agreement, a performance agreement. The performance agreement provides that if he were to default in the first year, he'd have to pay 2/3 of that back. If he defaulted in the second year, he'd have to pay 1/3 back. After 3 years, there is no requirement for payment. So they unanimously approved it. All performance agreements have to be approved since this wasn't a project approved in their budget. They have a certain amount set for grant requests. So it's within their budget and it's for your consideration.
Thank you, Tammy. Discussion? Yeah.
I mean, it screams Bartonville and I have no issues with it. I think we should do it.
I agree.
I agree.
Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve a resolution concerning the approval of a type B economic development project and performance agreement by and between the Bartonville CDC and
Do you have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Number 9, discuss and consider awarding a bid for depository banking services to Independent Financial Authorization, authorizing the town administrator to sign and execute a bank depository service contract beginning August 1, 2022 and ending July 31st, 2025 with a provision of two 1-year extensions under the same terms and conditions at the option of the town. Tammy?
State law requires a municipality to go out for bid for depository services. You can't have an agreement longer than 5 years. So in accordance with the local government code and with approval of town council a couple months ago, we did a request for proposal. It was released on April 30th for depository services. When we do that, we're required to publish it in the newspaper twice and to report it in a financial magazine in the state of Texas. Both those requirements were met. In addition, we sent the bids to Independent Financial and to Chase Bank, since Chase is located within the town. Prior years, we didn't have any banking services in the town. They had a deadline to turn in. We only received one bid by that deadline. The bid outlined a 3-year agreement with optional of 2 1-year renewals. Again, Independent Bank was the only bank that responded in time. We've been banking with them since 2007. After reviewing everything, there were no changes or increase in costs or anything in their services.
Thank you. Discussion?
Are you happy with Independent Bank? I mean, was that, they've been.
We've been, I mean, they've been, we haven't had any issues with them. There's really no one else that we can go to at this time. So in 3 years, if you want to, when that agreement ends, before that, if Chase Bank did contact us after the bid date, after the deadline, and what the person that it was sent to did not send it to the department that does the bids. So they couldn't get it. They didn't have enough time prepared. They really wanted to offer something to the town. So after the 3 years, the council can direct us to go out to bid again, or just renew the agreement with Independent Financial at that time.
We've been with Independent or North Star since
2007.
Okay, that's what. So a long time.
Do I have a motion?
I'll move to award bid for depository banking services to Independent Financial and authorize the town administrator to sign and execute a bank depository services contract beginning August 1st, 2022 and ending July 31st, 2025, with a provision for 2 1-year extensions under the same terms and conditions at the option of the town.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Number 10, discuss and consider forming an ad hoc committee to study through traffic issues. This is something that I requested that we place on the agenda for discussion. So are y'all okay with discussion? What do you think?
I think that we need to at least put forth an initiative to try and get citizens involved in this and get some input to see what the citizens want and how they want to attack it. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more.
And then if we do that, when will we try to start that and
Start it pretty soon.
Well, the council needs to decide what that scope of work, what is this committee going to be doing? You need to give us, what the purpose, what is the function of this group? If you want to advertise for people to volunteer on the group. So when we advertise, what exactly?
Like how many members, that type of thing? If you
Yeah,
have
we
any idea.
probably, we were thinking about maybe 2 residents. We have one, Stacy Smith is already on McMakin would like to be on it, she said. So.
So do
So
you,
what do you think
how
is
many
it?
members would you like and what members? Would you like members of town council, residents? We need some kind of, how do you want to formalize this ad hoc committee?
Oh, Bobby's going to be on it too, right? Okay.
Do you want,
That looked
since,
like he raised his hand.
He's doing this. I think
so do you want the police
Raise
chief?
it
Do you
one
want the
finger.
town engineer involved? Because there's things that you have to abide by through the state. I mean, there's,
I think Ed would
different
need,
things.
Ed would need to be involved, right, Ed?
Yeah, I do. There are definitely some legal issues that will need to be discussed.
Members, how many council members?
Do you think
could-
2 council members and 2 citizens? What do y'all think?
I was thinking 4 or 5.
Total people.
And I'll volunteer.
You want? He's going to do it? You want to do it?
Do you want to advertise for residents to see who wants to involve? And then at the next meeting, you can appoint those members to that committee?
Sure. Is that okay?
We can come up with a scope
Couple
of
of residents.
work for
2
you.
or
We
3,
can come up with a
whatever. Okay.
guideline and a basis and come up with a scope of work. We'll create that. And so at the next meeting,
Okay.
it'll be, we can advertise for it and have something for you.
That sounds good.
Okay.
So
Does that
then what
sound
we do
okay?
is just let until people volunteer and then choose.
Mhm.
Okay.
That's what you're talking about, right? Yeah. Okay.
We're not gonna put a number to it yet, are we? Till we get.
Can we talk about a number right now?
This is what you're doing, is giving us
Or do
direction
we
on
have
what you
have a
want
number now,
to.
or we'll wait until see how many,
I was thinking 2 council members, since that's all we can put on it, basically.
oh, you mean.
Is that
Yeah,
okay?
no more than 2.
You can have no more than 2 council members.
Okay.
What, Josh?
3
I mean,
citizens,
myself
depending on what we can get.
You and Keith,
And Keith?
who wants to do it? You and Keith, you guys?
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, me and Clay will do
Okay with y'all?
it. If you want to.
No, I'm
Okay.
good.
Staff, I'll be wherever y'all need me to be. so.
Okay. Thank you.
So that's 2 council members. Sounds like chief's gonna be involved, our engineer's gonna be involved, and then 2 citizens? Or do you wanna-
Probably.
You're gonna increase the amount of citizens that are being engaged.
See how many volunteer. That's
Yeah,
right.
Nicole?
Let's see who volunteers.
Because if you get 2 or 3, I mean, if you get 3 good ones, you may
Mm-hmm.
want to.
Yeah.
To Tammy's point, like, what are we asking this community to do? Identify the traffic issues? Because we know there's a traffic issue. Are we trying to look for ways to mitigate the traffic issue?
Yep.
Solving,
Okay.
yeah, I would say.
Ways to
How can we,
mitigate, slow up, reroute, I don't know, whatever.
Safety.
Safety for the
Safety,
citizens,
yeah.
for bicyclists, for horse
Bicyclists.
riders, for.
Safety being the priority, we just want to make sure that we give them a
Yep.
scope
Guidelines.
to work within, so we don't
Yeah.
just come back with, yep, we got a traffic problem.
Yep.
Mission complete.
Stop signs every 50 feet is what I was thinking, Matt. That's
I'll
okay.
tell you what, I'll find another way out of town.
People would still find a way to speed.
Probably. Probably. Okay, we're good on that one? Okay. Thank you. Number 11, discussion on visual clearance and overhanging vegetation along town's right of ways. Okay, so this is something else that I requested that be put on the agenda because we have some places here where you pull up at stop signs and you can't clear to the left or to the right because of the vegetation and the limbs hanging out. I really think this needs to be remediated as soon as we can. We also have a lot of vegetation. Thad and I were looking, there's a lot of vegetation covering speed limit signs, turn signs. We just have a lot of limbs that need to be trimmed so that people can see and clear different areas. One's Macon and Broome. That's a pretty bad area. Stonewood's bad, pulling out of Stonewood, look at trying to clear to the right. It's pretty heavy.
so are we talking about 2 different issues then of the overhanging trees from a person's the ditch or the tree onto a road, and then also any trees that may be impacting a stop sign, which would be within an easement where it would be a city obligation.
That's right.
Okay.
Most of them are in right of ways.
The vast majority are not within the ordinance of the sight lines. We had the code enforcement officer go out and he looked, we may, as part of this process, we may need to look at amending an ordinance. Because you've got 50-foot sight triangles from the center of the roadway. And those are not really, we really don't have many of those throughout the town. But again, over right of way or rights of way, as you pull up to that stop sign, that may be fine within 50 feet, but 60 feet, you've got a tree overhanging and making it difficult to see on a blind curve or on a hill.
And 50 feet's really nothing on Macon when they're moving 40 or 45. I mean, if you pull out on Broom Road there and you look to the left, you really can't see you have to pull about 3 feet out into the intersection, just clear to the left. So
Same going
I
on
think that's a
Jeter
big,
off Porter.
yep,
If you go west off Porter, I mean, I probably go that same way I do.
yep.
So
And then I just think there's safety issues. So we were talking about maybe looking at Tree Shepherd or Apex or one of those companies to come out and trim some limbs. Obviously, code enforcement has notified some of the folks, right? Go
Yes,
ahead.
ma'am. Code enforcement has notified some. Again, this is more courtesy. Those that are hanging out over the rights of way, those aren't necessarily of ordinance violation or code violation. So we're trying to get compliance with that site visibility, but it may be something that we need to do. So I included what action the council had taken back in 2019, and I believe we have a $3,000 line item right now. So again, some of this can be addressed. I'd make sure that we're in compliance, working through Ed, that we're not just cutting people's trees, because that's, I don't want to get shot. When you're out there just cutting trees down. But the discussion was we would notify either through the website or letters that, again, if y'all want to cut your own trees because of site issues in the rights of way, you can do that, or the town is going to come out and take care of that for safety reasons. So again, the council in the past had provided 6,600 as a line item. That's not currently there. So we were looking for direction on how we can make sure that the roads are safe and that the signs are visible.
Question. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Josh.
So is the other issue we've heard over the years is folks driving RVs that are tall and their ACs hitting. Are we talking about that too, or is this just specific to?
We're talking about
right-of-ways and stop
overhead. That's
signs?
another issue though, the
Well, I know
overhead.
that. So,
Yeah.
but that's not this right here. Okay.
This is just the safety and
Okay.
visibility.
Yeah, because then you get into the issue of maybe a resident doesn't have the equipment to get up that high.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Or who wants to be in a road when people are going 60 too, trying to cut.
Yeah,
trim
it
trees?
was entertaining.
Primarily what we're addressing is the safety issue on being able to sightsee
Yes.
once you come up to an intersection. I think we need to have, I don't think we need to be heavy-handed with this, because I've talked to a number of residents addressing some of this at that point. I don't think we need to go up and knock on someone's door and say, hey, you got a safety issue out here. Once you trim that tree down, you don't have a choice. You got to, well, if it's in there right away, I don't think big government needs to come up there and tell someone they got to do something. I would approach it to where, let's say, hey, well, it is a safety issue. And we're going to, if you can do that to help us out, that would be fine. If not, the town will go ahead and at our expense, we will do it. If you can't afford to do it, to use some type of be diplomatic about it, but let them to try and make it their idea, and then we're going to help them in order to solve the problem. That way you keep the residents happy, because I tell you, there are people out there that ain't gonna want to see you coming down and trying to tell them what they're gonna do with their brush or their.
Well, you're going to be our tree diplomat, I believe, and you're going to go talk to these people and show them, hey, look.
Well, we may have residents too that they may be older, just not
That's
physically
right.
able to do it anymore, and they need.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what I have told the citizens I've talked to, that, we're here to ask you to help us for the safety of the citizens. And if you can do that, we'd appreciate it. If not, we'll come out there and do it at our town's expense, just for a safety issue. But, I just think we need to be diplomatic about it when we approach these, because we got a lot of people that love their trees, and I'm one of them. But, just do it. Let's not cut a tree down. Let's just trim it up, because if there's 4 or 5 in a row and you're pulling up to a stop sign, it's all the underbrush that's got you blocked. It's not the trees itself, it's the underbrush. So let's trim all that and clean it up. And I think maybe use that approach. We'll be able to get the problem resolved.
That's right. Ed, do you want to say something?
Well, just to follow up a little bit with what Thad was mentioning, I think that we've got an ordinance in place that only goes so far. We talked about this about 3 years ago with Michael Montgomery, and I think there was a cost issue that was kind of making everybody on the council get a little bit of cold feet without paying so much money for doing things. But I think there are probably a couple things we can add to the ordinance to make it have a little more teeth to it, but not to be, as I think Clay was saying, too overhanded, or too heavy-handed.
Yep.
And so I think that there are some things we can do to help ourselves on that score.
Okay.
Is that the takeaway then, is to review the ordinance?
Yeah.
And see what changes may be recommended?
Bring back an ordinance at a future meeting.
Yeah, thank you.
And then perhaps
Proposed language.
Yes.
get an estimate on what
Yep.
it would cost to do some of that.
Yes.
and then
Yeah, 3
revisit
years
it.
ago, and if you look at the backup memo, 3 years ago, I think we had Apex because they used a company in case of the power lines and different utilities that are in the way. They have flagmen, they can control the traffic, so it's in a safe cutting environment, I guess you would say. And at that time, it was like $3,000 for certain areas, and I'm not sure if it's more of overhang at that time
I think-
instead of signage.
I think
So
it's
we
overhang.
we'd have to reach out and get some estimate, get a couple estimates and see if like go through the town, drive through with them and see what, and bring the number back.
I'd like to get one from Tree Shepherd too. Is that who some of the other towns use?
Yes.
Just to see how they
Absolutely.
operate and
Yep.
what their estimate might be also. Are y'all okay with that? Getting a couple different estimates?
I like the idea of getting a couple of bids. That's
Yeah.
great.
Tree work's expensive. So,
It
all right. Okay, so we're good on that. Thank you. Closed session pursuant to Open Meetings Act, Chapter 551, the town council will meet in closed executive session in accordance with the Texas Government Code Section 551.071, consultation with the town attorney to seek legal advice of its attorney regarding A, the development agreement and economic development agreement between the town of Bartonville and Newquest Properties and town ordinance number 411-06 and related matters. B, police operations. C, the town's noise ordinance. Government Code Section 551.074, personnel matters, deliberate and consider appointment and employment of public officers or employees, town administrator, town secretary, deputy town secretary, court clerk, and permitting administrative specialist. Time being 8:44, we're now in closed session. Thank you for coming. See y'all.
Thank you.